kind of phone call that makes your blood run cold. I was halfway through a mayor's conference in Washington, D.C., shaking hands with policymakers, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was my mom. When an elderly mother calls crying, you pick up. Make them stop, Jacob. They're tearing it all down. Her voice was raw with panic. My stomach turned to stone. Who? Mom, what's happening? They brought bulldozers. Her voice cracked as a crashing sound shattered through the speaker. I bolted from the conference room, ignoring the stares. Mom, get inside. I'm calling the police. They're not listening, baby, she sobbed. Veronica's here with men in suits. They're saying something about emergency orders. They're not giving me time. Veronica Blake. My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. The power-hungry HOA president who'd been terrorizing my mother for months, sending her violation notices for ridiculous infractions like overgrown roses and unauthorized wind chimes. I knew she had an agenda, but this was war. A sickening crunch rang through the phone. Mom gasped. Oh God, Jacob, they're tearing down the porch. My vision blurred with rage. I wasn't just a son anymore. I was the damn mayor. And Veronica Blake had just made the worst mistake of her life. When does a rule become a weapon? When it's in the hands of the wrong person. That's exactly what happened when Veronica Blake took over the HOA. She didn't just enforce the rules, she twisted them into a tool of destruction. And my mother, a 78-year-old widow who had lived in that house for over 4 decades, became her prime target. You might be wondering, why? Why would someone go to such lengths over a harmless elderly woman tending to her garden? The answer? Money and power. It started small. A notice for overgrown vegetation, because Mom's prize-winning roses were 3 inches taller than regulation. Then came the citation for the handmade wind chimes Dad built before he passed. Veronica called them unapproved structures. I had shrugged it off at first. HOA presidents could be annoying, but it was personal. She was targeting my mom. Then the violations came daily. A fine for the color of her mailbox, another for excessive bird activity because she had a feeder in the backyard. It was laughable until it wasn't. Mom stopped gardening, stopped sitting on the porch with her tea. She started looking over her shoulder, flinching every time the mail arrived because she knew another fine was coming. That's when I confronted Veronica at the HOA meeting. These regulations weren't in place when my mother's house was built, I said, my voice calm but firm. I was the mayor, but today, I was just a son. She just smiled, that smug, condescending smirk. Rules are rules, Mayor Miller. We can't make exceptions. Exceptions? This wasn't about rules. This was harassment. But the moment I knew something bigger was happening, it was the night I saw a black SUV idling across the street from Mom's house. Through the tinted windows, I spotted Veronica talking to a man in an expensive suit. I wasn't alone. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Chen, my childhood friend who now sat on the city council. Check your email. You need to see this. I opened the attachment, a draft proposal for a community enhancement project, a massive commercial parking lot. Guess where they plan to build it? Right where my mother's house stood. I looked up at the porch. There she was, smiling at me, clutching the same mug she had every morning, standing in the exact spot marked for demolition. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. Veronica wasn't just harassing my mother. She was trying to erase her. But she made one crucial mistake. She picked the wrong woman to mess with. And more importantly, she picked the wrong son. What would you do if this happened to your family? Comment below. If you think I should take her down, comment "fight back." If you want to see what happens next, smash that like button and subscribe for part 3. Some people hide behind rules. Others hide behind power. But the most dangerous ones? They hide behind both. That's exactly what Veronica Blake was doing. She wasn't just a power-hungry HOA president. She was a predator. And my mother, along with every other homeowner in that neighborhood, was her prey. I gripped my phone, staring at the Community Enhancement Project proposal. This wasn't just about some ridiculous HOA fines. This was an orchestrated land grab, a scam. a way to force elderly homeowners into selling their property dirt cheap. So Riverway Developments, the company owned by Veronica's husband, Douglas Blake, could swoop in and turn a profit. I felt sick. Mom's house, the one she and Dad built together, the one I grew up in, had never stood a chance. It wasn't about roses, bird feeders, or mailboxes. She was sitting at the kitchen table holding a stack of violation notices. Her hands trembled as she slid one toward me. "They're threatening to put a lien on the house, Jacob," she whispered. "If I don't pay up, they can force me to sell." A lien. That was the final step. Once they attached debt to the property, they could take legal action, seize it, and sell it off. I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palm. Veronica was tightening the noose. Outside, movement caught my eye through the kitchen window. A black luxury sedan parked across the street. A man in an expensive suit stepped out, sunglasses reflecting the morning sun. He was tall, confident, the kind of guy who was used to people saying yes to him. He walked straight to Veronica's house. I grabbed my phone and zoomed in just in time to snap a picture. Then he turned, and my stomach dropped. It was Douglas Blake. What the hell was Veronica's husband doing here, in broad daylight, holding what looked like a folder full of contracts? I didn't have to guess. I pulled out my laptop that night and started digging. If I was right, this wasn't just shady HOA politics. This was fraud, corruption, and possibly even racketeering. I combed through property sales records, HOA bylaws, municipal zoning laws. Then I found it. The HOA's jurisdiction ended exactly 3.5 feet before my mother's front porch. That meant every single fine, every violation, every threat, all of it was unlawful. Veronica wasn't just a bully, she was a criminal, and she had no idea I was coming for her. There's a special kind of rage that comes from knowing you're too late. I was standing in the middle of a dull, bureaucratic meeting in Washington, D.C., pretending to care about a debate on parking ordinances when my phone vibrated. Mom's name flashed across the screen. I answered immediately. What I heard chilled me to the bone. "Sweetie, there are big yellow machines outside." I shot up from my chair. "What? What machines?" "Bulldozers, Jacob. They're tearing up my garden." My vision blurred as I grabbed my laptop and bolted from the room, ignoring the startled murmurs of the other officials. "Mom, get inside." "I'm calling the police." "They won't listen, baby. Veronica's here. She's saying something about structural issues and emergency orders. The police are just standing there." I felt the breath leave my lungs. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was war. From the background noise, I heard the deep, guttural groan of wood splintering, a sickening crunch that sent a spike of adrenaline through my veins. They were tearing it down. "They say I have 10 minutes to get out." I gripped my phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "Mom, listen to me. Grab your medicine, Dad's flag, and your photo albums. Don't argue. Just do it." "There's too many, Jacob. The call cut out. I hit redial, but it went straight to voicemail. The next number I called was Sarah Chen, my childhood friend who lived 2 streets away. She picked up on the first ring. "I'm already here," she said, voice tight with fury. "It's bad, Jacob. Really bad. Tell me." 3 bulldozers, a demolition crew, and Veronica's on her porch, drinking champagne like she's watching a damn movie. I didn't even realize I had punched the wall until my knuckles started bleeding. "Get my mom out of there, Sarah. Now." The next few minutes were a blur of desperate calls, to the governor's office, to emergency contacts, to every legal and city official I knew. But it was Sunday. No one was picking up. By the time I got through to someone with real power, it was too late. I watched it happen, live-streamed on Sarah's phone. The house I grew up in. The house where Dad taught me how to ride a bike. The house where Mom baked cookies every Sunday. Reduced to rubble in under an hour. And through it all, Veronica stood there, sipping her champagne, smiling. I didn't remember the 6-hour flight home. I didn't remember the drive to Sarah's place where Mom was staying. But I will never forget the look in my mother's eyes when I walked through that door. She was sitting on Sarah's couch, clutching a small, folded American flag, the only thing she managed to save. Her hands trembled as she whispered, I told them, "You were the mayor." But Veronica just laughed. I swallowed the lump in my throat and wrapped my arms around her. She thought it was over. She thought we had lost. But she didn't know what I knew. Veronica thought she had won. She had no idea what was coming. There's a moment when grief turns into something else, something sharper, more dangerous. That moment came as I sat in Sarah's dimly lit living room, watching my mother clutch the only thing she managed to save: Dad's folded flag. Her home, her memories, her entire life had been reduced to a pile of rubble. And Veronica Blake had sipped champagne while it happened. I had spent the last 5 years as mayor, learning how to play by the rules, navigate the system, make change happen the right way. But what do you do when the system fails? When the law moves too slow? When the woman responsible for your mother's suffering is still sitting comfortably in her $1 million home, thinking she got away with it? I exhaled slowly, my rage settling into something more useful. It was time to fight back. I spent the rest of the night at my desk, digging. There was something off about the way that demolition happened. Even HOAs couldn't move that fast. I started with city records, permit filings, demolition requests, HOA jurisdiction lines. Then I found it. A survey map from 1975 showing the original boundaries of my mother's neighborhood. My eyes traced the faded lines, and there it was. The HOA's authority ended exactly 3.5 feet before where my mother's porch once stood. The demolition had been illegal. I leaned back, rubbing my hands over my face. Veronica had overplayed her hand. But I wasn't done. I combed through emails, financial records, property transactions. I found LCS, shell companies, buying up homes in our city under different names. But when I dug deeper, they all led back to one place: Riverway Developments. And the CEO, Douglas Blake, Veronica's husband. That's when the final piece fell into place. The violation notices, the ridiculous fines, the threats of liens. It had all been part of a carefully planned operation. Veronica wasn't just harassing my mother. She had been targeting any homeowner who refused to sell. She had been manufacturing violations, driving up debt, forcing elderly residents into foreclosure, so Riverway Developments could swoop in and snatch up properties for pennies on the dollar. I clenched my jaw, my fists tightening. This wasn't just HOA corruption. This was fraud. I needed more proof, something airtight. And then, as if the universe wanted this case wrapped with a bow, my phone buzzed. A message from my old college roommate, Mike Reynolds, now a reporter at the biggest news station in the state. "Check your email. You're going to want to see this." I opened the file. A security video time-stamped 1 week before the demolition. I hit play. Veronica stood in the shadows of the community center parking lot, talking to 2 men in suits. One of them was her husband. The other? The CEO of the demolition company. She shook his hand. He handed her a thick envelope. And just like that, I had her. She had destroyed my mother's home. Now, I was going to destroy her entire empire. There's nothing more dangerous than a corrupt person who thinks they're untouchable. That was Veronica Blake. She had spent months tormenting my mother, stealing homes, rigging the system, and she thought she was going to get away with it. But she underestimated one thing. Mr. By Sunrise, I had everything I needed. Proof of fraud, illegal demolitions, secret deals. A web of corruption so deep that once I pulled the first thread, the whole thing would unravel. I wasn't just taking this to the city council. I was going to bury her. That afternoon, I walked into the HOA office. The air was thick with the smell of expensive perfume and entitlement. Veronica sat behind her desk, flipping through paperwork, completely unfazed. She looked up and smirked. "Mayor Miller, what a surprise. Coming to terms with progress?" She gestured out the window where my mother's house once stood, now a pile of rubble. I set a thick folder on her desk and slid it toward her. "No," I said, my voice steady. "I'm here to watch you fall." She opened the folder, her eyes scanning the photographs, emails, financial records, the security footage of her pocketing an envelope from a demolition contractor. Her smirk flickered. I have copies filed with the city council, the district attorney, and I paused, enjoying the moment as her fingers tensed around the papers. The state attorney general's office. Veronica scoffed, but there was a slight tremor in her voice. This is ridiculous. You think some technicalities are going to... You illegally demolished a house outside your jurisdiction. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. You accepted bribes. You committed fraud. The color drained from her face. I leaned in. I don't think, Veronica. I know. Before she could respond, the front door swung open. Sarah Chen walked in, followed by 2 city officials and a state investigator. The investigator held up a warrant. We need access to all HOA records immediately. Veronica shot up from her chair. This is harassment. I have rights. Sarah crossed her arms. And the homeowners you scammed didn't? Veronica's mouth opened, but before she could spew another lie, the investigator spoke. Your financial accounts have been frozen. Any attempt to hide or destroy evidence will result in additional charges. The walls were closing in. Veronica grabbed her phone, probably to call her husband. She didn't know that he was already being questioned by the FBI. I turned to leave but paused at the door. Oh, and Veronica? She looked up, eyes burning with fury. You might want to find a good lawyer. Because after tonight? She wouldn't just lose her job, she'd lose everything. Some people fight for power, others fight for survival. But the most dangerous ones? They fight for justice. That night, Veronica Blake learned the difference. I walked into City Hall, my briefcase heavier than usual, not because of weight, but because of what was inside. Every document, every violation, every fraudulent transaction, the proof that would end her. The council chamber was packed. News cameras lined the walls, their red lights blinking like silent witnesses. Homeowners filled the seats. People she had bullied, extorted, forced out of their homes. And in the front row, my mother sat, clutching Dad's folded flag. I adjusted the microphone. Last week, many of you watched as bulldozers reduced my mother's home to rubble. The HOA claimed it was an emergency demolition for safety reasons. I let the silence hang. They lied. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I clicked the first slide on the screen behind me. A 1975 property map. These boundary lines show that the HOA's jurisdiction ended 3.5 feet before my mother's front steps. The demolition. Illegal. Gasps. Whispers. I saw Veronica's lawyer shift uncomfortably. I clicked again. Emails between Veronica and Riverway Developments. These emails show direct communication between Veronica Blake and Riverway Developments, owned by her husband, Douglas Blake. The whispers turned into outraged murmurs. One more click. A bank statement showing HOA funds being funneled into a private account. This, I said, turning to face her directly, is wire fraud. Veronica sat frozen, gripping the edge of the table like it was the only thing keeping her upright. And then she made her biggest mistake yet. She shot to her feet, her voice shrill with panic. This is a witch hunt. You're just bitter about your mother's worthless old house. The room went dead silent. I smiled. Thank you, Veronica, for that outburst. Because now... I nodded to Sarah. She hit play. The audio recording echoed through the chamber. Veronica's voice, clear as day, discussing kickbacks, fraudulent violations, and plans to force elderly homeowners into foreclosure. The room exploded. Shouts. Anger. A woman sobbing. One of Veronica's own board members jumped up, hands shaking. I didn't know, I swear. Another one stood, eyes darting toward the exit. It was all her idea. She made us do it. The council vote was unanimous. Effective immediately, the HOA was disbanded. All fraudulent property sales were frozen. And Veronica? She was led out in handcuffs. She thrashed against the officers, screeching about her rights. But the only sound that mattered? The standing ovation when my mother walked onto that stage,